I've been doing the fascia maneuvers, and my whole body feels healthy. And so I did some exercise in the traditional sense of exercise after I did the maneuvers, and it's the first time I've been able to air squat and it feel good in years.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. Which ones have you been doing specifically?
So I've been doing the 10, but this morning I did the first 3, right? And then the next 3 after that get really deep into the hips. So I really like the first 6. And then after that, it's more in the head, which I know is good. But I try to do the 6 at least every day.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's cool. Right on. And have you noticed changes in your anything other than your physicality? Have you noticed changes in your reactive state, your mood, or anything like that?
So I'm usually really mellow and calm and stable and stoic, but I am feeling a little bit more emotional.
Perfect.
But when you kind of open the floodgates to that, it's not pretty. That's so I'm recognizing that shifts are happening, that but I'm in the stage that isn't pleasant right now. So it's weird because I normally haven't let myself be bothered by anything, but the last week or so, I've been feeling that, which I guess is part of the process. And I just had clarity on it last night and this morning that maybe something's happening where I'm feeling all of this other stuff that I'm normally not used to feeling. And I kind of don't have the capacity to handle it.
Yeah. That was part of our program, was because people were taking care of their body, and then all of a sudden the floodgates open and it's whoa. And it's not just emotions, it's everything. It's it's the way we see the world, it's the relationships, everything changes, literally everything. And so it's how to manage after you open those floodgates. What do you do? How do you manage those emotions when they come up? Which is what we've been teaching. Yeah.
So it's so we divide the body into 3 states of awareness. The lower state of awareness, which is the rear brain, and it has the motor controls, the hormones. The rear brainstem down in its musculoskeletal, and it really basically has 2 emotional pushes. Either I'm in love with something or I fear something. It's the binary part of the animal in us. And then as we move into the midbrain, which is your organs and your emotions, in the limbic system, that's what it's triggering, is it's actually opening up the midbrain. And then the midbrain is where all of our emotional centers are. We were taught and trained that we move through thought and through mind and through control, but it's actually not true. We move through emotional impulses. Before I move, I have a desire to move. And once I get up and move, I have a fear of not getting my desire, so it keeps me moving. So even movement itself is emotional, but we were taught and trained that it's practical, it's logical, and stuff like that. And then we get up to the frontal brain, which has a neocortex, which controls our perception. And our perception is the most dominant force in our whole state of awareness, because perception can change our blood pressure, our hormone levels. It can cause the body to exasperate. It can calm down. And this is why once we open up the emotional centers, then it's training people on how to manage the perceptions. So if I give you a really rude emotion, fear, at the very lowest level, fear is a binary pull away jerk for my life. But less than fear, but still very emotional, is anger, which is basically in our emotional centers. Fear is visceral. It's in the body. It's animal. it takes us out of control. But anger, we have the ability to control it. So that's in the midbrain. And then frustration is a perception of anger, which is a way that the neocortex can manage it. Because if I'm angry, instead of being angry, I can be frustrated. Has less impact on my physical body, my health, and the ones around me. And so it's like softening that emotion as it comes out.
Yeah, that's so the thing is that I'm not used to feeling things like anger or fear. I didn't really deal with any fear, but I have dealt with some, like it's just new. And I know that I'm going through a process, and I was kind of just letting it flow through me. But now I'm aware that that's what's happening. And so it's pretty interesting.
The other thing you could do is when you feel those imbalances, sometimes it can just be organ imbalances. That's why the organ reset with the breathing, that's why it's so powerful.
I've done that a few times. I need to keep on doing that for sure.
And you just kind of you'll get used to where your body is off, because what we're doing with acupuncture is we're bringing up one side of one function and reducing another simultaneously so that there's a balance. So basically, doing them all does that. But also, if it's dealing with anger or frustration, for example, you can just do your liver and your right there.
I definitely think that my kidneys are also out of balance. Every person I see, the kidneys comes up, whether it's an acupuncturist, a iridologist, a Tai Chi master, they talk about my kidneys. And so I definitely I think it's my right side is really constricted. So my right kidney is maybe smaller than my left. So I feel that area when I'm doing these maneuvers.
Good. It's opening up. Yeah, it's starting to open up. So what happens is, if you think about the maneuvers in the simplistic way, the way that we see how fascia moves, these aren't fascial lines. They're more like rivers and how it moves. We see that you have a bone, and then wrapped around the bone are rings like a tree. Each ring belongs to an organ pathway. And what the fascial maneuvers are doing is they're opening up from the center of the body. When we deal with like an organ, like for example, like bladder, it immediately has a release in the entire body, because it's taking the layer that's right around the bone and releasing it. And then so everything else commensurately releases. And so primarily, if you think about your spine here, and you have the first layer, which is you have your yin and your yang organs. So like the liver, the large intestine, the bladder, the ones that have the most power over the body, wrap closest to the bone. And then the other organs, the layers wrap outside. And as we move, the body is to go like this. What happens is, if we store a lot of anger, the inside layer stops moving. And then the outside layer has to over move to create the movement. This is where we start to get muscle tears and stuff like that. Because we have the outside layer of fascia, those 5 layers moving like this, over moving, instead of a cooperation like this, which they're supposed to do. And so that's what you're feeling when you do like totally twisted, and it feels like the hips and that loosen from the inside out.
So the other day I had a session with a lady. It's kind of like a psychic session where she brought my light body up into an extraterrestrial ship, and they were energetically working on me. And after I was talking about you guys and kind of what you just said, but my version was way more simple. And that made sense to her, because so her thing, whether it's true or not, is that she is in a extraterrestrial watch interdimensional entities work me some sort of med bed. She can see what there's stuff happening that she doesn't understand, but what you just explained, I explained to her, and she said that makes sense to her based on some of the things that she sees them doing to her patients up there, that they're like doing something in the body that doesn't really make sense to her, but this concept helps her understand it a little bit better.
Yeah, I think there's a couple different practices. One, I went with a girl that we were working with 2 years ago, and we would drop into this kind of like a meditation, and instantaneously we feel pressure on the body. And it was basically what she was explaining is that those are other beings working on the physical body. So I felt it. I have no idea what it is, but I certainly felt it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, so you're saying that these, are they spirals or rings?
Well, so imagine it this way. So when you're a baby, you've got a round balloon of skin, and inside it, you've got the fascia and the bones and muscles, everything floats inside of it. With a baby, it's really easy. You can like turn bones around and move them pretty easily because there's very little constriction. So in order to make that water, that gel stick, it learns to create movement patterns in it. Like one of them is standing up, and another one is crawling and walking. These movement patterns have some consistency in them. One of them is a spiral is the best way to take this. So the fascial spiral lines, which we study, are the primary lines which get us up and moving and allow us to balance forward, backwards, and go up and down. Those spiral lines are developed specifically for walking. And the way that I could explain it is like if you got a big river, and at the end of it, like it's like maybe the river is like 60 feet deep. At the end of it, when it's gone, at the end of it, you'll see a river bed, a small little bed. But that doesn't really show you the scope of that river going between these two mountains or whatever. It just shows you this little bed. That's what we think fascial lines are. It's a bed. It's when all the river drives up, that's what you see is those specific lines. But the fascia, it knows how to navigate the environment, and it's always feeding information to the brain. So you think about this, your fascia is biophotonic. It moves information at the speed of light. And as we're moving along the ground, the fascia and the body is constantly evaluating energy and inputs, whether it's sight, sound, touch, taste, hearing, or sensory processing. Like when you're walking into a room and all of a sudden something feels weird and you stop. That's not your brain doing it. That's a signal saying something's wrong. It's being interpreted by the fascia or by our bodies. And in these movement patterns that we develop them in order to create function. Like one of the most basic ones is crawling. And people who don't learn how to crawl have dysfunctional walking. That was me. And that dysfunctional walking, every time you walk, breaks down the body. So we learn these patterns in order to get the body to move in a specific way. The challenge is that since we think that those are the only patterns that we work with, then the body gets so used to it, and our movements are very restrictive today. We walk on two-dimensional planes. We walk on concrete and pavement, on paths. We weren't designed to do that. Our body was designed to have constant reflex and information coming back. And the fascia, it's monitoring as we move in real time, taking the information and then communicating it to the brain to protect it milliseconds later. But we feel stuff in our body before the brain does. One of the ways you can get it is if you touch a pan and it's hot, you pull your hand away, and then about 3 to 5 seconds later, you start to feel the burning happen. And that's, the way that we explain that is the peripheral nervous system. It doesn't go to the brain. That's the way that they explain it. And there's some evidence to say that is true, but that doesn't mean that every reaction, every quick movement is like that. Like the example we use is when you step on glass. If you step on glass, you move very quickly, and you move to a coordinated effort to safety. But it takes 1.5 seconds for a nerve signal to get from the foot up to the brain, process through the homunculus, the cerebellum, back down for a motor control. So if we were walking, we'd step on glass, it'd be like 1/1000 move. But we don't, we move intelligently right away. And that meant that something was moving our body before the signal of threat got to the brain. Something was moving the body to safety. And again, we can't explain it with a peripheral nervous system like that. That's peripheral. And because when we move, we're moving to safety, we're coordinating the action with a specific intent. And so that's not a knee-jerk reaction. So that's where we started off saying, the brain doesn't move the body because it doesn't get the information fast enough to make the adjustment.
So is there an intelligence in the fascia?
Yeah, it has a brain. It's called an interstitium. It's funny because when you try to Google it, the real reports are buried for obvious reasons, I guess. But yeah, if you put down fascia has an interstitium, if you actually wrote that in Google, you'll start to see the reports come up where they talk about it. But yeah, it has a brain. It's the human brain has 1,000 nerve endings. The fascia has 100 million nerve endings, the brain, and the fascia has 100 billion nerve endings. So the fascia is 1,000 times more sensory processing, has more information, 1,000 times more than the brain itself.
So basically, then that expands the brain beyond the head, right? I mean, the whole body is essentially a brain then, which is why we things like yoga or when we go and find ancient sites, you see a bunch of figurines in different postures because the body's position must have a function, right?
You just jumped a whole bunch there. So the fascial maneuvers, the inception of the idea of the fascial maneuvers, which I had before I came to Canada, but I hadn't done them. I'd kind of worked a little bit, but the fascial maneuvers, the three of us created together and did together. The inception of them was actually, I realized it when I was, that it was a Greek statue. It was Achilles' heel. So I was trying to stretch the bladder meridian down here on the right side. And as I went down like this and turn around, it started to open. And that was a counter rotation. And I had this moment of clarity that was the actual pose of Achilles. And then I go back to every time I saw a Greek statue as a kid, I used to think, why is it like that? Why did they pose like that? I used to think that all the time. No idea why is a random thought in my head. It's because those statues were information on how the body heals.
Mm-hmm.
But can you imagine? They left the pictures there, but they took away all the words. So there's no trace of it anywhere. And what's interesting is that we find, even in Rome, we find the bones of ancient Romans, but we don't find any ancient Greeks. Where'd they go? There's more to that story. And so studying Greek mythology was a lot of the understanding. It was for me to get some concept of the story, why I was here, because storylines tend to repeat. And by studying the Greek mythology, we started finding things in there, like even here's one, hypocrisies. He said that a doctor who does not use astrology is not a doctor, but a fool. And so we have our modern medicine read the Hippocrates. They read the Hippocratic Oath. They read everything about them, but somehow they miss those one core things, key things. And there's just way more to this than we can even begin to know.
I mean, if you look at the actual sculpturists, right, the people that were actually making the sculptures had to have an advanced knowledge of the body as well, right? But definitely astrology is all into it as well, because if you're studying the human body and then these people were also looking up into the stars for some sort of meaning of life, then they can see the connection. And like you said, maybe they didn't keep documents the way that we keep them, but there's still knowledge within the culture somewhere.
Yeah, I think the basic inputs for me was studying indigenous life, or how they lived. The other one was looking at Greek mythology to get some concept of how people thought of the body, the world that they lived in. And then after Greek mythology, I have a fascination with taking things apart and understanding how they work. So when you look at how we're built as a baby, we're built in 3 trimesters. Basically, the first trimester is very musculoskeletal. It's the primary nervous system is coming in. The second trimester is where the organs, the meridians, because the organs actually grow outside the baby originally and go inside through the anus, actually. So they fold in like a sock. And then the third trimester is where the neocortex develops right in the 9th month. And in each trimester, the first trimester, we look kind of like an alien. And the second trimester, we resemble an animal of some sort. And the third trimester, we really look human. So looking at those in those 3 trimesters also gave us the idea of how to, we said, if we're constructed that way, well, let's look at the body in those ways. The rear brain, the lower brain, the midbrain, and then the frontal cortex, and what does it control? That's how we really got to the thought process. And understanding that we had to train people how to manage perception in order to manage their body. Because perception, again, becomes the most dominant. If you have an imminent fear that you're going to be shot when you go outside, it doesn't matter what you do when you go outside, you put on a bulletproof vest and gear, you're still going to have anticipation. And so that perception is the one thing that is not talked about in today's society. It's not managed. But those things, along with looking at embryology and looking at the astrology, and also looking at the mythology of it, is where we came up with the idea. Because there had to be a clue in there. There had to be a way that people lived healthier when years ago. We're not told that, but people lived a lot longer than they do today. And they were healthier in general. So there's all this myths about how we live our lives, and whether it's true or not, who knows? I mean, I do know one thing. After last year, we did a 44-day fast. And we were hiking and running and in the lakes. And I mean, it was incredible. Energy, the ability to move through our day. And the only thing about it is that with that fast, we learned that we didn't need food as a fuel. So what is food, and how, and starting to break down all these concepts of how we live our life, and then reorganizing it, because something was wrong. I mean, we're not healthier than we've ever been. We're sicker than we've ever been as a society. And so that means that all of the information, all the knowledge, including ancient knowledge, all the way up to today, has got us to this point. Because I know a lot of people who study all the ancient wisdoms, have all the ancient practices, but they're still messed up in their bodies when they're 80 or 90 years old.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So, I mean, you're talking about, well, then what is it about food that makes us feel nourished? I mean, food is essentially just stored sunlight, right? Like the trees and the plants are collecting sunlight, and then it's transmuting it into the food that we eat. Whether we're eating animals that eat the plant, or we're eating the plant itself, it's essentially stored sunlight. And if you have a bunch of plants that are raised indoors underneath lights, like a lot of our food is, then that light stored within those plants it's not harmonious to the human body, as
right.
well as like all the chemicals and everything that is probably the main problem. With the herbicides that are just killing all the bacteria within our gut, stuff like that.
Yeah, there's a couple things to unpack there. The first one is, there is light in everything. I mean, we're photonic. We emit light, so do plants and animals. But when the food comes into our body, we utilize 80% of our energy in the digestion, processing, and elimination of it. So my question always was where does the energy come from that we're consuming? It's not like a Prius where you can break yourself into a full battery. You can't, have a reduction powered from reduction to power us up. So in other words, food is not our fuel, it's our medication. So it is actually doing something. But if we were only to use food as we needed it, and quite frankly, if you want to try it, because you're crazy enough to do this, try a chew and spit diet for a day or two, where you just chew your food, but you don't swallow it. So you still get all the chemical load, all the organs start to prepare. We did that. And what happened was all the processes of digestion continued to go, even though there was nothing to digest. because the body already knew. Food goes in, has a habit of running.
Yeah.
So that basically the signaling at the end of it, since food is not a fuel, what it's doing is it's providing input as a medication to help us move forward. So that's, and what food does is it fires the endocrine system. So when we were fasted, we're basically using no hormones, very little, only in emergency. Whereas today we have hormone rushes all throughout the day, because once we eat the food then fires the endocrine system. It's the vitamins that the hormones are reacting to. So we're addicted to the feeling of the hormones that we get from the food. So that was what we broke, is we broke that addiction. Now it changed our whole relationship with food. It changed the reason why we eat, what we eat, and also a lot of the beliefs around it. Like I'm not going to get fat eating things. I'm going to get fat holding emotions. And this was a big shift, because there's one thing to say, you know, I'm controlling my diet, I eat the way I want to, but there's nothing to be not connected to or attached to food for fuel. So when I think of food right now, I think of what is my body looking to do, not how am I powering myself. Is my body looking to heal right now? Is it looking to think, to be more clear? Is it looking to relax, chill
Yeah, that's almost like if you're doing that chew and spit diet, it's almost like a homeopathic.
Yeah.
You're kind of using food just to get the trace energetic response out of the food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was our thought process.
Well, because the Greeks and the Romans had vomitoriums at every house. So they would eat the food for pleasure and then vomit it out. So, and we still not clear on that.
I've never even heard of that word.
Yeah, they have
vomitorium.
Yeah, vomitorium. So if you go into Greek and Roman, in the ancient Greek and Roman homes, they have that place where you go and vomit, because they knew they would eat the food for pleasure, get the hormones, but kick out the waste. The question is this, and this is a deep one. If we don't need food, then how did we get addicted to food? And if I look at the anatomy of the body, you're going to see something really weird. The greater omentum is how the food goes from the digestion into the blood, right? Greater omentum sits on top. The way it looks and it's pictured, when you see it in books, it looks like this organ that's flat. There's lots of veins in it. But when you see it on an actual body, it literally is like a scar over the entire GI tract. It looks like a scar. So it looks so much like a scar. Well, it is a scar of some sort. So at some point, the body had an adaptation to food because we don't need it. So at some point we did. This is the wildest thing. I have this belief that that if a baby was not given breast milk, then the animal part of us wouldn't grow. So in other words, and what I mean by breast milk, be careful how I say this, is that they had no food at all. And the people around them had a belief system that you didn't need it. And it's interesting. It's going to happen at some point, I'm sure. That's
the whole ascension process, right? Is that we're going to become less physical, more light, and less need for digestive system, less need to eat, because we're going to be absorbing all the other cosmic energies. And that's what we're going to be connected to.
But how do we get there? That's the question. Because generally, from the yogis back to the Tibetan monks, they talk about this light body and what you had to do to get there. It's like 13 years meditating without a negative thought. And I'm like, I can't drive on the highway without having a negative thought. I mean, it's like, motherfucker.
You got to sit in a cave.
So the idea is that that's using the mind to overpower the body. But I believe the body in its right state, then we'll have to make those adjustments. And what adjustments do we have to make for that ascension? Because we can generally agree, people of consciousness, that there's an ascension coming. But what does it look like? How do we get from here to there? You know, like is it all in one snap? Is it like gradual progression? So in our lives, we feel like it's gradual progression because we're seeing things in our bodies that are not commensurate with normal behavior of the body. Like, for example, the fact that we became very cold and sensitive. We were like swimming in oceans and mountain lakes, very cold. And at first didn't even realize how cold it was to other people. So cold and sensitive was one. Another one was growing taller. I mean, it's not like Jason could get much taller, but he's put on an easy inch and change, inch and a half this year. And for me, almost 3 inches since I was in LA from a total. So our bodies are growing and they're changing and they're doing different things. The other part too is when we were fasting and I was 2 weeks without drinking. The way I got my fascia hydrated is I just got in the water and absorbed, so that we can see the layers of fascia. As we do this, we can see the layers change. And it also changes the way the muscles work and look too, because the muscles look like they have shape and composure, but they also have like a little layer of what looks kind of like skin on that. And that's fascia. It's promoting the fascial tissue. So there's been such a transition. And also when we did brain scans last year, we had brain mechanics in here and they were doing EEGs, brain scans, photonic scans on us. And our brains are completely different.
It looked like a Tibetan monk.
Yeah, and I've never meditated really, not for anything substantial, not 13 years anyways.
Well, I mean, if you're doing these maneuvers, that definitely is all the components of meditation, maybe even more, because you're putting your focus in the totality of your body as opposed to just kind of trying to shut your eyes and shut off everything and stop thinking. You're like, you're in a focus of position and then you're in complete alignment. You're like an antenna. That's
actually, you say antenna. So here's a couple of interesting facts. The fascia is the same chemical composition as a quartz crystal. So we're basically a liquid crystal, same ingredients. And inside that liquid crystal, our bones are bio or vasodiastic. They spark when they touch. So that's why the only bones that really touch is the rib cage, the teeth, and the ears, because spark, that's our power, right? And if you take the sacrum is the one part of the body that doesn't decay, and the sacrum's in a triangle. But if you were to MRI it, it actually has a circular path up like this through that triangle. And then it has a long pole up to a big bulb on the top, which is our skull. That's basically the same design as a cellular antenna.
Well, if you look at the pelvis as a bowl, and then if you look at those satellite things that have like it basically is receiving and then it's going up to another bowl, right? So it's kind of designed exactly like a satellite dish that's also beaming out and receiving.
Well, it's interesting that you say that too, because the pelvic floor is actually a diaphragm, and it's always looking to the jaw, the palate, to align itself. So if they're aligned, you walk straight. But if your jaw turns one way, your pelvic floor has to turn the other. So there's a lot of communication going on in the body that's not necessarily done by the brain. It seems to be coordinated by areas of the body, and the brain coordinates the activity.
Yeah, that's pretty. Yeah, that needs to be digested by an entire culture so that we have the best minds taking that and running with it in terms of how we educate ourselves, how we design our furniture, how do we design our clothes and our shoes and our homes.
Yeah,
because these are all important aspects of the human condition.
You know why everything is designed in our lives is designed as right angles? It's because we use Pythagoras numbering system 0 to 9, repeat to 0. So it goes up to 9, dies, and goes back to 0. But if we were to use the numbering system of 8, for example, that's harmonics, that's music. Everything would be round and flowing. So all of our buildings would be round in nature. All of our architecture would be flowing around. And let's just say that there is no accidents. That was designed a certain way. Because even though we find solitude in finding right angles and clean lines and stuff like that, the brain doesn't actually like it. We've been trained to like it. The brain likes curves, likes nature. So every movement that we do today is two-dimensional. All the workouts, with exceptions. I mean, people who use kettlebells or who are working out, like picking up sacks of potatoes and moving and stuff like that. It's very, very different when you like pick up a sack of potato or you pick up a barbell, what it does to the body. It's how the body works and reacts to it. So this is part of the journey, is to look at what you said, is look at the body a different way. What if everybody believed what we believed in fascia and the body and food? Because literally, as far as I know people have fasted before, and I know people have done 24-day fasts, but it was different, the three of us doing it, because we had reference points. Normally crazy people like that, it was just like me and you doing that. But I had two other people crazy enough to do it with me. So I got to observe what it looked like and how we reacted. It was pretty different. It was when we were in the fast, it was difficult for people to be around us because we didn't say anything. We had very little movement. We would drive in a car for like an hour and basically we're perceiving the thoughts of other people. So we know each other so well, so we're not even talking anymore. So our talking went down by 60, 70%. So it was because there's just all these cues that you can see. So imagine this, again, if we're eating, it takes 80% of our energy. That's our perception, basically. Our energy is our perception, because when you do maneuvers, have you noticed that things look brighter or they sound differently? You get into the third one, all of a sudden it's like, I noticed the river, I noticed the trees. That's because as stress goes down, perception goes up. So as we're doing the maneuvers, we're bringing our stress down. Well, what if you took away 80% of that stress constantly? Right. What would you perceive? And if you did that for a period of time, if you did it for a day or two, it would be like, wow. But if you do it for a month, then all of a sudden you start to habituate that perception.
It's like being on mushrooms
every day,
because everything is vibrant and bright, and you see literally everything. But it's different because mushrooms is still external to us, whereas this machine, when it's running properly, has the ability to perceive on all levels. Because I find mushrooms it's more visual and perceptually aware, like in your mind. But in that state, it's to emotions, it's to physical body, it's to everything. Yeah.
Well, when you were just talking about fasting and being connected to Jason and Cynthia, like on a non-verbal way, and I look in your guys' background, I see all the green forest jungle behind you. I started thinking about, well, in that state, then we should, you guys probably were able to connect with like a tree, for example, because you don't have to wait for it to speak in English. You can somehow pick up the vibration and energy of the earth. Yeah. And then Jason, you just mentioned mushrooms, and that's, you're basically just taking the essence of fungus, which is its entire job is to connect. It's basically to be the internet of the forest. But yeah, that essence is within us as well. And so we don't need that external channel. We just need to learn how to turn it on within ourselves.
I also think it's extremely underestimated how much our environment influences us. Like if I'm completely at a state of zero or nothingness, and all of a sudden negative thoughts come up, is that mine? Is it the person that just walked into the room? And so what we found when we were on the fast was we were almost at a state of nothingness for like weeks straight. And so any change in my internal state, from what my organs were doing, what my thoughts were doing, what my emotions were doing, I was able to decipher whether or not it was mine or somebody else's when they came near me. And so that's a very interesting thing, because it's like all of a sudden I'm getting thoughts about food, or all of a sudden I'm getting thoughts about anger or whatever it might be. And then this person's in the room now, and they weren't in the room 10 seconds ago. So I'm able to now really, we become a channel, we become psychic, right? Because the body's able to pick up all that information and we can interpret it. But it's important for me to be completely aware of where I am at all times for me to determine the differences.
So one of the things that we talk about is that there's a personal momentum and velocity that we move in. So like we're on this planet Earth, okay? It's spinning, or some people say it's not, who knows?
Right.
Yeah, but
It's something's happening. Or
yeah,
both
something's
of it.
happening. Something's
Or all of
happening.
it's
Something's moving, there's air, and maybe we're flat, who knows, who cares? But we live in this biosphere and it's moving regardless. Somehow we're moving, whether it's flat moving or spinning. So technically we're moving at 33,000 miles per hour. So everything within it is moving at the same thing. So the only way to understand where I am, where my position is in this world, is to be completely still for a moment. That's why near-death experiences change people's lives, because that is completely still for a moment. You know, I've had a couple. Jason's had one, and the near-death experience brought. Well, let me give you an example. So let's say you're in a boat. You're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean or Atlantic Ocean, whatever. You have no visual clues, so you don't. You know, it's cloudy out. Can't see the sun. You don't know where you are. And the question is, can you tell if you're moving or not? And the answer is no. That's how people get drifting on a boat for forever. The only way to know that you're moving is to have a reference point. Mm-hmm. And if you can't have a reference point, there's no way to understand that. So what happens is in our world, we're all moving at the same speed. Technically, we're all moving at the same speed. And then we continue to move individually within there, but we're still moving at the same speed. Unless I put a stake in the ground and say, this is me, this is where I am, and start looking for perceptions like around me, like in other people, reflections. That's where perception is. Then I'm just moving like everybody else. I don't even know if I'm moving. And so the biggest part of it was to put a stake in the ground and then look at perceptions around us and then start to understand where we were in space and time. Because when I'm in an emotion like anger, I'm not perceiving. I'm in the river. I'm in the river of anger. I'm not watching it. I'm not observing it. I'm in it. And I can get lost in it. So the emotions have the most impact on the human experience. I mean, they control everything from how we move to how we react to things. But where do those emotions come from? Like, how are they stimulated? Is it a thought? And this is part of what we went through. Like in the third dimension, everything is a stimulation first. So it's a touch. One of the ways I conceptualize this, I imagine that I'm in a room, like when they show you in heaven or whatever, you wake up, it's all white. I'm like, where am I? What am I? Why am I here? These are the questions. And I could be there for a period of time and enjoying the whiteness or whatever, but all of a sudden something comes along and touches me. I'm like, what is that? Am I safe? Is the next question. Is it okay? Is it friendly? These are all the different things that happen. So it's the stimulation that happens first, and then the thought is created from that stimulation. And that thought then looks for resolution. That thought is energy. It looks for a narrative. Can I tie that feeling or sensation to something I know? And if it ties it to a narrative, then I have an action or inaction based upon it. And so the belief that we even think is actually is crazy. We perceive. And the reason why the US Patent Office exists today is because inevitably when somebody has an original idea, somebody else has one at the same time. So in other words, we're not really thinking. It's always been there. The ideas are there. And we have access to receive them at different ways by adjusting our tuning fork, our cellular antenna. And when the fascia is open and clear, the antenna opens for everybody. So everybody becomes psychic. Everybody becomes perceptive.
Yeah. And because we didn't even have the movement of food through our body. So the only movement we had was our heartbeat and our breath. So we were very still. So any changes in the environment, what we would do to confirm what we're talking about right now is I'd say, are you thinking negative thoughts right now? Do you have this emotion right now? And so we would check with each other where everybody was in our environment. So we were constantly getting feedback of what I'm feeling in that moment to what's happening in my environment. So I was getting confirmation.
And that's 24 hours a day. That's why the fast was so powerful. It took our evolutionary process and just moved us exponentially up the ladder. So all of a sudden, because I used to use high doses of THC sativa, and I balance it off a little bit of wine to get in a state where I could channel. And the reason I was doing that is because I would channel about fascia and about how it worked and stuff like that. But I would do that at a specific time with substances. and I said, well, if I'm doing it this way, then I has to be able to do it without anything. So how do I get there? Like, how do I get to that mushroom feeling where I perceive the world? So what we did is we started microdosing, but we did mushrooms every day for a year, every day. And we started off with 0.3, 0.5 grams a couple of times a day. By the end of it, we're doing, personally, I was doing 7 grams of mushrooms a day, but not high. Mm-hmm. I was just in that perception state all the time. And so what happened after a year doing that, Ra?
I would travel through time if I took seven grams. I've never even done that.
Yeah, well,
it's like you take a gram and a half, 3-4 times a day. And over time, you habituate a perception level, a state of awareness. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was.
Can I comment on some things?
Yeah, sure.
I'm already forgetting what you guys were just talking about. Oh, I wish I would have took notes.
Well, we were talking about the island.
So you mentioned the patent office, and people come up with ideas all over the world at the same exact moment. The way that Ra from the book series, the Law of One book series, the way that he explains, or I guess it's not a he, it's a mind, body, spirit complex of a whole extraterrestrial civilization from Venus. But the way that he explains the levels of densities, which is essentially the levels of ascension, is that right now we're in 3rd density. 4th density, we start to begin to feel every other human. Mm-hmm. So all the humans on the entire planet start to feel what other humans feel. That's going to change things, right? We want everybody to be happy.
The next 18 months. Mm-hmm. That's what's happening next year.
That's the Aquarian age. Aquarius is to feel myself and to feel the world.
And then after that, we start to link up with our knowledge. So then the next level, the 5th density, is it's all knowledge. So then we just become completely a species that knows everything that is to be known by all the individual entities. And that's why we have to develop the individual nature of ourselves, because then we are a component of the whole thing when we are thinking and feeling everybody, so that we have the knowledge of billions of data points throughout the entire planet. We have the knowledge and the feeling states of every portion that's possible in this physical environment. And then eventually the physical vessel becomes not so important, right? Like once we have all the data from what is possible to feel, what is possible to know on this planet, then we can start merging into the 6th density, which is more of a bodiless state, which is where Ra is now. And then we can then go to another planet and help them ascend through the processes. And what you're talking about is, these are ascended levels of being. And I think it's the crutches. It's not the crutches, but it's the map. Like we're starting to build the map of how this could be possible for the species on this planet.
We're building a map. Now the map, we need a GPS, we need a locator, we need an antenna. So we need a transmission point and an antenna. We got a transmission point. It's the information that comes to us constantly. Everybody gets it, but few can interpret it. And as we open up the fascial layers, this is the true connection. It's the true energy of the body. When we deal hormonally, we're dealing with the animal part of us. As we open up fascially, we're opening up the layers to perceive. Mm-hmm. And everybody seems to go through it. Now, fascial maneuvers, we've only been doing for a little over a year and a half. But we've had people now that have been over a year and somewhere around 6 or 8 months. 6 or 8 months, people are having all these physical changes where their lives are physically changed. At somewhere around the year level, their thoughts and their way that they live their life changes. And the way they look younger, their body changes, they start to change. We are starting to have evidence of this now. And these are, again, people that are independently doing it, that are not necessarily here or around us all the time, that we're getting this feedback from. So it's definitely an evolutionary step. We believe that opening up the fascia is the next step.
And we're documenting each step along the way. Like each day we take note of what's going on in the body. So as people come through the journey, we know where they're at. We can say, oh, they're at this phase because they're going through this. And one of the things that you brought up is that you have a lot of emotions coming up. That's a phase. That's part of the journey.
It's funny because I read about this in books all the time about how when you're opening up, you're going to go through this, like, dark night of the soul. And like this, it's explained in different times or different ways all over. And it was just like funny because it kind of like last night I was like, oh, that's what's going on.
Right.
Opening up.
So we call that embodying experience, because we have all these experiences, these thoughts. This is what spirituality and ascension has become. It's become a thought, not an action. And I have this thought, and every once in a while I go to a new moon, or I pray, or light candles, or whatever. Great, but the truth is really in the body, because again, it's our ability to receive the information and interpret it. The brain is it's the body's the computer. The brain is just a processor. It runs programs and interprets it. I mean, to dumb down the brain and make it very simple, the brain's job is to identify patterns and resolve them. Technically, that's what the brain does. And we like to do, that's why we like patterns. That's why we like to solve things. And that's not a very intelligent, it's actually a very mechanical mechanism, but we've given all the credit to here. And we've given no credit to the body.
Yeah, we've spent so much time training the mind that there's millions of people you could talk to who know about a lot of the stuff that we're talking about today. But how many people are actually walking around embodying this? And the ones that are hiding in a cave somewhere. So what we're doing is we're trying to find a way, or we're building a way where we can still live our life and still do the things that we want to do while being conscious and actually embodying the philosophies, of spirituality, really.
You know what's crazy? And maybe you guys can take this and I don't know, digest it somehow. I have a lot of people that come up to me and several times this has happened to me. And I've happened to many people where they mention a podcast that I do, and then they mention where they were when I was saying the particular sentence that they remember. Right. So in their mind, it's not really in their brain where the data point is, right? It's somehow a memory within their body or the environment. And even me, like I remember a specific part of the book, Think and Grow Rich. And I remember I was walking on my college campus 20 years ago in the wintertime. And so there's some sort of storage mechanism that's not really happening in the brain, right? It has to do with movement and environment. And that's where the imprint is. And so if there is an intelligence in the fascia, then this is a whole new level of learning. If we can learn how to optimize how we imprint knowledge into the body.
We played around this with our fast.
Yes, dramatically.
Yeah, big time. We would look at everything in our environment, and then we would tune into how we felt and save the feeling. And then, do you want to elaborate more on that? Because there's a few steps to it, even eating, when we cauterized the experience.
Yeah. So one of the things is that we went back to eating food, which was a decision. And when we went back, we would go to eat something. Can you imagine eating something? You know what it's supposed to feel like or taste like, but there's no sensory. I don't feel it anymore. So I have no feeling attachment to the food I'm about to eat. So I know it should taste like something, but I don't have the memory in my body. That was one of the real tricky parts of coming back to eating, because what we could do is we could decide to choose a feeling for that food. And that imprints in the brain, fires the hormones when you eat it. And then that's part of what saves it in the body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you have anger in your body and you eat, you classically condition your body into that anger. You save it. It's like it's a save button. So what we were doing was we would look around in our environment, we absorb all the information, we would tune into how we felt, we would save that feeling, and we would close the experience by eating something. Because it saves it.
Because it's a save button. So this is why it's so important not to eat food when I'm angry or sad or fearful. Because let's say that every time we have our go-to foods, like I'm depressed, so the bucket of ice cream, whatever. What happens is we get a hormonal rush, which is now saving that information, that feeling, and this is how I should feel every time I feel like that. Like Pavlov's dogs, we're saving the feelings within our body. And
yeah. And you just pile it on every time you save it, right?
That's why when people fast, they get all grumpy.
Yeah.
Because what's happening is all the emotions are now coming out. They're starting to resurface. If every time you eat, you just save it for later, you push it down instead of addressing it. Because a lot of our energy to our awareness goes to digesting and processing and eliminating the food in the first place. So sometimes we get an emotion, we're not even aware of it because we're so distracted in our body that it sits and it stores for a later time. So when we fast, for the first 3 days, most people get really emotional, really grumpy, and they think it's like withdrawal symptoms from not having their coffee, this and that. But really it's because the emotions are finally having that opportunity to come out.
Because the emotions are connected to the organs. If the organs are busy processing all day long, they don't get a chance to talk. Mm-hmm. That's why intermittent fasting is so good for the body. Because we only have to give the body a little break, and then it already starts producing stem cells. So if the body's producing stem cells when you're fasted, and when you're in autophagy, which is an intermittent fast, then what the heck is it doing after 20 days or 30 days of not having food?
Mm-hmm. One of the best
winter time, right? That's the whole concept of no matter where you were living on Earth, there would have been a winter time. Well, not everywhere on Earth, but a lot of places on Earth, there would have been a winter time where there wouldn't have been so much food, and there would have been a lot of resting because the sun wasn't out, and then there would have been a lot of stem cells, and that was the whole repair process. Like we repair every night, but we also repair yearly during the winter time when we're resting a lot and not eating, and then we're getting basically a stem cell replenishment of the body. And maybe that's why we used to live longer as well.
Yeah, well, you can actually even Google it. The oldest man living in China is 284 years old, died.
Yeah,
and we have evidence of that. I mean, they did a story on him 100 years ago in the New York Times, same guy. So we have evidence that people live longer, and that evidence has been suppressed for obvious reasons, because the way that our whole society is built on averages and what's normal. So, for example, it is clinically true that after 12 breaths a minute, you start hyperventilating. But it's also clinically true. It's also society true that the average person breathes 15 to 16 breaths per minute. So what we're saying is hyperventilating is normal. And that's how we measure everything against what a norm is. So what we're doing now is with these, we call them fascially aware bodies, we're testing new norms. Like one of the things that was happening, I could eat sugars without having a blood spike, without having a blood sugar spike. So my pancreas was acting a different way, but that's not commensurate with everything I know about nutrition.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, you rewrite the rules. Like that's what I learned in the gyms, is that there's ways to become functionally and mechanically and physically stronger without the traditional workout, tear down your muscles and wait for them to repair stronger. Like there's other ways to increase the power. And that's what got me interested in this other stuff, is like, well, if everything I thought about how to make people stronger and fitter and perform better is wrong, then what is What's the source of it? Like, what's the answer? What am I missing? And that's when I started discovering things like light and how water operates in the body and the power of air and earthing. And then this other, this consciousness or ether that's flowing and arranging it all. And that's it's a lifetime's worth of exploration. That's very exciting.
Mm-hmm. There's also, at what point do we say that strength, like an abnormal amount of strength from lifting weights, is unnecessary? Because really, at the end of the day, as long as we have the ability to do all of the things that we want to do throughout our life, like, carry groceries, pick things up, move the couch, whatever it might be, there's a point where it caps. We don't need superhuman strength necessarily. And people are spending so much time lifting weights, building that up, quite ego driven for the most part. And how much does that have consequence as we grow older? The body was not designed to lift weights the way that people are lifting them today. We're meant to climb, we're meant to hike, we're meant to swim, get out into nature and move our bodies naturally. And then the body will adapt to the environment, whatever the environment is. If you're climbing a lot, you will build the strength in your hands and your upper body to climb. And so the way that I look at it is people are just absolutely destroying their bodies. By the time they're in their 40s, 50s, 60s, they're completely broken because they're just lifting weights up and down constantly.
And that's where I was. I'm 53, and I lost quite a bit of my range of motion, heavy when I moved around. And today the range of motion is insane. Like the ability, I can do stuff that would look like I've been a yogi for my whole life. And I always do this as example, but I could do that easy. Mm-hmm. More than 360 degrees ranges of motions. This is the way the body was designed to be.
Mm-hmm. And unless the environment is supportive for that level of strength or movement, you're going to lose it. At some point, you're going to lose the motivation to go to the gym, or you're going to stop, or something's going to happen. And you're going to lose that strength anyways that you spent years and years and years building. So why not build an environment around you that supports what you're trying to do? And even to the point where, like, moving on rocks, like why do we have completely flat surfaces everywhere in our home? Why couldn't you have a room that has undulated surfaces that you could move on? That's more natural.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like that's what I guess the yard is for, right? But even in the house where we're spending the whole time walking in 90-degree, upstairs that are perfectly designed for us to take these short, convenient steps. Mm-hmm. There's, that's where we have to just be creative within the modern world of how we can turn everything into its own playground.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's actually what fascial maneuvers. It turned our lifestyle into a workout or into an exercise, because we do things throughout the day, which are based on the philosophy of fascial maneuvers. Fascial maneuvers is really a philosophy. It's about how the body works and the key to getting the entire body to work. Like yoga today is designed. It's very two-dimensional. Designed with as it came to America. Because people couldn't maintain their rotated postures and stuff like that. But in the early yogi pictures, you see people counter-rotated, heads turned, and stuff like that. But we took part of that out to get people to do it. And so even the intention of yoga has changed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And even to the point where if our environments were set up in the right way, we wouldn't even need to do any of these movements, and the goal is not to be doing maneuvers every day until you die. The goal is to use them at this current point to get us back to where we're supposed to be in our bodies, and then create an environment that it's sustainable.
And life is sustainable too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We can't take parts of the old way of living, and that comes down to the way we think. Remember, we were talking about perception before. What's interesting in a lot of places around the world, you own a piece of property, you own it for life. But in the United States, North America, you own it as long as you pay your taxes. You don't pay your taxes, they come and take it. So there's an imminent fear that that in Maslow's hierarchy, food and water first, shelter second. So our food is being poisoned, and we have to work for it. We can't go collect it. We can't just go out and get it. So that means that there's a fear of our food and a fear of our surroundings, and those low-level fears impact the way that we live our lives. So we're born into fear. We're taught if we, like, for example, why do we work? Because we need money. What do we need money for? To pay our bills. Well, what are our bills? You ask this question to a human being or a kid, it's bizarre how it goes in circles. Like the average person only like 100, 150, 200 years ago spent about 8 to 12 hours a day maintaining their life. That was it. 8 to 12 hours a week maintaining their life. And today we're doing 8 to 12 hours a day just to maintain our life. So we have been, it's commensurate with our economics and the way it's worked. Even the US, the dollar in the last 40 years has lost 95% of its purchasing power. 40 years, yeah. Well, 5 cents buys you what $1 would buy you today. And so we've gone through these cycles, but we're in a system that's keeping us constantly stressed out, constantly in fear. Even the idea of money and the way it works. So one of the things that we went through in our journey was detachment from money. That seems a little radical, but the four of us that are here, that live here, work here every day, we don't have salaries. We're not looking to store money. We have a belief that we're moving away from what we think money is today. And we have enough. We have like 6 shirts total, 3 pairs of shorts. So we've reduced ourselves into this minimal environment. And I never thought I would be a minimalist. And somebody called me one a couple months ago, or they said, well, you guys live like minimalists. And I thought that wasn't living like a minimalist. It was just saying, what do I really need? And why do I have more of it? Why do I carry that stuff around? So even the way that we think about money and we think about our lives has changed. That's why the whole Fascial maneuver program, all of our content, all of our education is for free. Because at that point in time, and we could monetize it, and we could have courses that are built around it and stuff like that. But we believe that people should have the right to understand how their body works and what to do about it. It should be something that everybody was born being taught like language, and we're not.
Right. So the transaction is just going to interrupt that. So you guys choose to not transact a monetary fee.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and where we do get money is contributions or donations. Where people will give us $5 or $10 a month or something like that. We have some supplements and some other things that we have that have a profit margin, which we're bringing out, and then we have some affiliates. But that provides us, if we all work in this way without the goal of personally having money, having our pile, and because we do that, our expenses are also way down. So it allows us to get this content and this idea out without having to, like the amount of videos that we produce, we would be spending, anywhere between 80 and 100 grand a month. But that's all in-house for us because we have people with the same values, same belief system. So it's really, what we're doing is pioneering a new way to live in this world and how to do commerce in this world. Even our setup with money, it's crazy. Money is designed because the use of money was designed to take the emotions out of trade. Because if I'm going to trade my services to you, like I have knowledge, I'm going to trade, I'm an accountant, I do taxes. You're a butcher, you have meat. We value what we have more than the other values what they have. So instead of having these uncomfortable negotiations where we had to barter and really do things in a fair exchange, we put a piece of paper in between and we just agreed that ours was worth that much paper and everybody else would agree. That's the buy and sell market. But that and having and using money in that way, all it's really done is taken out the emotional exchange or the real exchange of energy. We know in the spiritual practice it's important to exchange. That's why people would pay for stuff. They don't take it for free. The reason why is because what you're handing around is human time. Money is created by human time. So we measure it against the ability to produce. So here's a random thought. But if the population of the United States was dying 20 years earlier, and money is based on the ability of a human to produce, then by killing people earlier, it makes the money worth more.
Yeah, because there's less time available, right?
Right. Yeah. And by living longer, it makes the money worth less. It's a pretty binary, simple discussion when you look at it from that angle. Say, what is money doing to us as a society? And this is coming from a guy who's made lots of money in businesses my whole life. From 9 years old, I was an entrepreneur. And it's now coming full circle and saying, hey, there's something wrong with the way I did it, the way we do it.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy when you just decide to not chase money and how everything can still happen without it. Like when you just have that intention that the life and your value to society is still going to keep on going, even when you choose out of the money, the traditional money route, everything still works the exact same way.
Yeah. Money doesn't come to ideas. Money comes to ideas and projections. So beliefs, manifestations, ideas. Ideas don't really go to money. That's why money people try to invest in idea people. And it usually doesn't work out very well for one of those two parties at some point. That's the investment market. And that's because the truth is, if I have the idea and it's good enough and I believe in it enough, eventually the resources come around to bring it to fruition. And that's what you're experiencing when you changed your life.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy because then basically every law or every rule or every program that you have in your life, you can experiment with and say like, well, what if I do this? What will happen? And you can just see that just basically how limitless everything is. Like there's no rules and anything's possible.
That's right. But we were taught that there's rules. We were taught that you had to work and you got to work hard for your money. You got to save lots. You got to be careful how you invest. Think about it. Work hard, save, be careful how you invest it. Keep it close to you. We have all these rules around how we live our life, especially around money. And these rules are taught and ingrained in us, in our nervous system, and they affect the way that we viscerally believe. So believing is in the body, and the brain says, I believe. It records it. And so if I believe, then I can achieve. Back to the Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. It's all about how we perceive the world and what we believe. And if there's a program that's run into our nervous system about our relationships or our emotions or money or whatever, those emotions, that's what we're actually projecting, is the belief systems. So the attraction is to our belief systems, not to our words and not to our actions specifically. That's why if I say things over and over again, I tend to believe them. That's why the news does it, repeating a narrative.
So we got a hard stop coming up here, Ra. But we have a supplement coming out. Has he taken the Power Curve?
No.
The Garage before?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, so we're going to be launching our Power Kirk, which is the world's strongest anti-inflammatory product.
Curcumin?
But it's
basically Thorne Nutraceuticals. Their curcumin has an inflammatory rating from ORAC Labs of 9,500.
Mm-hmm.
Ours is 500,000. It's insane.
It's like the whole bottle.
We tested it. We tested it with for a couple of years at the garage in house as that product was coming to market. And then when we moved to Canada, we didn't have production, so we have the production back. So that product's coming out. It actually blocks a heat shock protein called MSK1. That heat shock protein is what causes inflammation within the layers of the fascia. So, because what we knew years ago was that this affected connective tissue, but we weren't thinking about fascia being connective tissue necessarily. So this product is out. We'll be shipping it next week. You take one tablet, give yourself 30 minutes, your brain calms down, your body calms down, aches start to go away, and you can move freer and with less restriction.
So we'll send you some to try it out.
Yeah, it's bizarre how good it works.
Sounds interesting.
You know, we also have a ketogenic product too. It's the only ketogenic product. It puts the body into ketogenesis in 20 minutes, but it keeps it there for 4 to 6 hours. It uses a patent. So it's the only ketone product in the world that uses butyric acid, which is inside our gut. So we take a little bit, it stimulates it. So we don't have to take as much. In other words, you're taking BHB, normally you have to take 4 grams of salt and of BHB, and then you have MCT oil to activate it. This one is only 1 gram of BHB needed. So it's 3 times less salt. So it's less hard on your body, and it lasts, instead of 45 minutes to an hour, it lasts 4 to 6 hours.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's like pre-workout on steroids without the negative effects.
Yeah, and if you're fasting, it's really good too, because your body goes into ketosis right away.
Right. Awesome.
So we'll get some of that stuff out to you too.
Cool. Yeah, excited for that.